For the English translation listeners, there will be, if you have not heard the announcement from the Singapore group, the Southeast Asian group, we'll have the review today after 15 minutes after the teaching, after His Holiness has stopped, 15 minutes after that. And the review will be done by Geshe Lobsang Trakpa from Namgyal Monastery, who is an experienced teacher. And so please, those who wish to attend, let me know. Tanda yore tanda yungen yor the group chik let me do bit. Yungu mi theba yungu. Tanda shoge lebde. Ale aka. Kuni desa sharra chigde mit shima tsanga jayimchi. Nasu lagdisa. Nani lebto mas lagdisa. Na. Kuno achide tse shora chisngani. Yeah, God. She do the one. She do Tasman. We are at 47. Yeah, I have marked there. Verse number 47 on page 15 of Bodhisattva Charyavatara. So in order to confess or disclose your, purify your negative actions, we have to apply the 4 antidotes, what are known as the 4 opponent forces. So first one is that of the regretting that you have done some mistake in the past, so you acknowledge it as mistake, and therefore regret. So that's the first one. And then the next one is called the support or opponent force, known as this, the force of support. So in order to confess your negative actions, you rely on that to, of course, with regard to creating negativities, you do that in relation to either to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, who are the higher objects of refuge, and the higher objects of refuge, and as well as sentient beings, other sentient beings. And so in relation to them, you confess the negativities in connection with the objects of refuge. So verse number 47. So the Buddha, the teacher, seeing the negative deeds that you have done as being something bad, you regret and take refuge. And now verse number 58, I purely seek refuge in the Dharma, which they have realized clears away the fears of cyclic existence, and also in the assembly of Bodhisattvas. So the Bodhisattvas here includes those of the Arya Bodhisattvas as well as the Bodhisattvas on the path of accumulation and preparation. So you take refuge in them. And verse number 49, I, trembling with fear, offer myself to Samandabhadra, to Manjushri. Also, I make a gift of my body. So Samandabhadra, Manjushri, and so forth. To them, you take refuge and offer your body in their service. As to the protector Avalokiteshvara, who infallibly acts with compassion, I utter a mournful cry, please protect this miscreant. And similarly, and the verse number 51 is read, and 52 mentions Vajrapani, who is a slightly wrathful form of deity, the Bodhisattva. And so to the Buddhas and the Shravaka Sangha, as well as Bodhisattva Sanghas, and ordinary bodhisattvas, as well as those of the bodhisattvas in the who are gods and goddesses, as well as nagas and so forth. So, from verse number 53 shows that of the refrain, showing refrain, saying that you are not going to repeat the same mistakes again. So previously I have transgressed your advice means having gone against the instructions of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and so forth. But now, upon seeing this great fear, I go to refuge. By doing so, may this fear be swiftly cleared away. 54, 55. So this physical sicknesses, which is ordinary, if such a sickness, ordinary sickness, needs medicine to cure it, if that is the case with the physical sickness, here we are talking about a mental sickness, sickness of mind. Those of the sickness or the disease of afflictive thoughts and emotions. So not only one or two times, but being fettered with or inflicted with this over and over and constantly. So you have to, in order to cure this disease of the delusions, you have to train yourself in the precepts of the teachings and overcome them. Verse number 56. Of course, physical sicknesses sometimes could be quite grave, serious, but the more serious is more serious, which is that of the delusion, the disease of afflictive thoughts and emotions, disturbing emotions, which we voluntarily kind of indulge in, and therefore have bias against some and attachment towards others. So while we wish to have happiness, we create negative actions which bring more suffering, and therefore the fault or the defect of these, the fault or the disadvantages of disturbing conceptions, disturbing emotions is quite serious. So the medicine to cure this disease of the disturbing conceptions and emotions is to cultivate the positive factors which go against them. So all the different major religious traditions also talk about cardinal sins, such as Christianity talks about cardinal sin, and teach how to refrain from engaging in them. And similarly, there is in the Hindu tradition and so forth, in the Indian tradition, there is also the means to overcome this kind of diseases. But the root of suffering, which are those of the subtle and gross, or grasping at a self, independent self, and the understanding of emptiness is something which is taught only in Buddhism. And therefore, to cure this disease of the full cure or treatment for curing the disease of the afflictive emotions is the all-knowing physician, the Buddha, that can uproot every misery, is extremely bewildered and worthy. Verse number 57. You may fear the existence of the lower realms, that you may be born there and so forth, but because of our grasping at some kind of permanence of oneself, that will live longer and so forth, therefore we do not train our mind in this, seeing the impermanence. And how much more so it says in 57. So one factor for our negative emotions is the objects towards which we either become attached or angry. So we become attached to those things which we feel appealing, and we become averse or angry at those which cause obstacle to achieve that appealing thing. So out of the three poisons of desire or attachment and anger and ignorance, the most powerful one to bind us to the samsara is that of attachment. And due to craving, we are bound in samsara. And therefore, there is the practice of showing moderation in terms of our clothing and so forth. And the root of attachment and anger or hatred is that of ignorance. So the objects of attachment, which are seen as beautiful, become something which we cannot detach ourselves from. But they are changing, they are impermanent. So there are four distorted views, which are those of viewing or conceiving permanence in things which are impermanent, and beautiful in things which are ugly, and having some selfhood where there is no self, and then pleasurable things which are in the nature of suffering. So because of attachment, we have, because of seeing some things beautiful as being beautiful, we are attached to them. So underneath the skin, the beautiful skin, we are not aware of the the pus and the rotten nature of things and so forth, because when certain conditions meet, they become, things become rather, they turn into pus or give out blood and they become rotten and so forth. So we are not able to see them, and therefore we become attached to what is perceived as beautiful. And because of that, also we also develop anger or hatred. So when you see things as being impermanent and ugly, the attachment towards them as conceiving them as permanent and beautiful and so forth will also reduce. And similarly, seeing things which are in the nature of suffering as being in that nature, of course, we are not talking here about the physical things which are in the nature of suffering as being some kind of a sensation or the feeling of suffering as such. But they are in the nature of suffering due to being contaminated results of our delusions and karma. And then we also view or conceive things which as having some kind of a selfhood where there is no self. And we also see them as having some true identity. And you have to be able to see the opposite of them. So all the things that we have experienced in the past, such as our food, clothing, and friends and relatives and so forth, have ceased. But the negative karma that we have created due to our attachment to them still are with us. '61. So while we are alive, we have friends and relatives, and but when we die, we have to leave them behind. If all alone I must go elsewhere, what is the use of making friends and enemies? So there's no use in making new friends and enemies. How can I be surely 62? 63? 64? '65. So these shows the negativities that are done through the three doors, body, speech, and mind. So you confess all the negativities that are done through body, speech, and mind in general, and particularly those negativities that are done through a self-cherishing attitude, extreme self-centered attitude. And therefore, those for going against one's vows and precepts are also confessed. So many of the negativities that we commit are because of our self-centered attitude. And so the source or the root of all our misdeeds, wrongdoings, are twofold, which are the self-cherishing attitude and the grasping at self. So with the help of our bodhisattva, which holds others to be more dear than oneself, we can reduce the strength and the power of the negative actions, and also with the help of our wisdom realizing selflessness. So most of these negativities are done through the self-centered attitude and the self-grasping, and therefore when we do certain things which for some might become wrongdoing, non-virtuous action, for certain others it may become a cause for virtuous actions because of the not having the self-centered attitude but concern about the benefit, well-being of others. So all the unmeritorious actions and the karmic actions which we create, which lead us to the lower realms of existence, are done through these two forces, which are self-grasping and self-centered attitude. Therefore, verse number 56. So this shows that of the refrain, the force of refrain, meaning from repeating the mistakes. So as it is said usually that you should have regret over one's wrongdoings, as if having ingested some poison, that you realize that you have ingested some poison, how much regret you must regret. In a similar way you have to regret the wrongdoings. And if you're physically healthy, then you can do, as part of the purification, you can do prostrations, recite the prayer or the sutra of the 35 Buddhas of confession, and apply the 4 opponent forces as well. And then, having done the purification practice through the 4 opponent forces, at the end, whatever merit you may have accrued through this practice, you should dedicate them for the benefit of all sentient beings. And so it is important to cultivate bodhicitta. Of course, Tantra is very famous. Deity Yoga, doing Deity Yoga is very famous, but without the help of bodhicitta and the wisdom realizing emptiness, tantric practice, Deity Yoga will not be that effective. So you cannot have Deity Yoga while having this ordinary perception of yourself, or this ordinary conception of yourself, but you have to transform yourself into a deity based on the meditation on emptiness. And you cannot do Deity Yoga while you're full of self-centered attitude. Chapter 3. So all the virtuous actions which lead us to fortunate states, as well as the causes that as well as the result, which is the higher rebirth, we have to rejoice in them. Verse 2. It says in verse 2, I rejoice in the definite freedom of embodied creatures from the miseries of cyclic existence. So definite freedom here refers to those of our hardship. Verse number 3, I rejoice in the awakening of the Buddhas. And also in the spiritual levels of the children. This refers to the Bodhisattva grounds and Bodhisattva path. Verse number 4. So you are here rejoicing in the Bodhisattvas as well as the ocean of virtue for developing the awakening mind that wishes all beings to be happy, as well as in the deeds that bring them benefit. Next verse shows that of requesting to turn the wheel of Dharma. Verse number 5. With folded hands I beseech the Buddhas of all directions to shine the lamp of Dharma for all bewildered in misery's gloom. So in order to dispel their ignorance about what to adopt and what to discard. Verse number 6. Buddhas having performed their enlightened deeds and then think of passing away. So you are with folded hands I beseech the conquerors who wish to pass away to please remain for countless eons and not to leave the world in darkness. And also you can extend the same prayer to the lamas and gurus who are blessed by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Verse number 7 shows that of dedication. Thus, by the virtue collected through all that I have done, from you are dedicating here the virtues or the merits that you have collected through the practices of offering, through to the requesting not to pass away, saying, may the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away. So you're dedicating it in order that you may have a healthy body, mind, and as well as all limited sentient beings across the space to have that. And you dedicate your virtue for the benefit of all sentient beings. And in this way you have a very expansive, broad sort of state of mind. So whatever virtue we do, it is important to always dedicate them in such a way for the benefit of other sentient beings, for their well-being. Otherwise, even if you may have done quite a good amount of virtue, but if you do them merely for the pleasures of this life, then that's not so great. So I sometimes jokingly tell Indian friends and Westerners, you should either be a believer and not be corrupt, or you should become a corrupt person and not a believer. You cannot be both. While you say you are a believer, you cannot indulge in corruption. So otherwise, you may be doing your prayers for the success of your corruption. So So that will be like actually ridiculing the God or the higher being that you believe in. So even if you have some friends whom you trust, you have to do things which are in accord with the friend's wishes. If you do something which is totally against the wish of your friends, that will not be good. And so in a similar way, of course, even amongst our Buddhist brothers and sisters, if you do your some good deed, like prostration and making offering and so forth, you may do them with a wish or prayer to for your own good. That you may not have sickness and you may have a good health and money and so forth. So you should do your best to try to dedicate all your virtues for the benefit of other sentient beings. So verse number 7 shows general dedication, and then verse number 8, may I be the doctor, the medicine, and may I be the nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. So you may be able to help a patient personally by giving the necessary medicine and so forth. But when you do that, you should not look for some kind of a name of fame that you may gain something from it. But if you do these services, give services with these kind of prayers, then it's really truly helping others. So in Africa, there's so much famine, and millions are in the danger of dying of starvation. But the United Nations and other people are doing so much to help them, which are very good. And then there is the, if we can reduce the gap between rich and poor, we should think about that. So this is relevant here. And during the eon of famine, may I myself change into food and drink. With regard to this eon of famine, there are different interpretations in the sutras. Verse number 10. May I become an inexhaustible treasure for those who are poor and destitute. So you can imagine the things so that they become helpful to those needy ones, whatever their need be. May I turn into all things that could need and be placed close beside them. Verse number 11 is finished. Verse number 12. So with verse number 11, Song says that we can think about the benefit in short-term benefit as well as the ultimate lasting benefit of final happiness. By giving up all, sorrow is transcended and my mind will realize the sorrowless state. So our huts of the Shravakayana also have the do not have, of course, that of miserliness, but they still do not have that of the perfection of wisdom as such. So the perfection of generosity has to be trained for through by dedicating whatever you have for others, and practicing charity that helps others. You also dedicate the merit from that for the benefit of others, and in this way you can progress further and further until you become absent of or free from miserliness. Having given this body up for the pleasure of all beings, so whatever merit, whatever you can give, actually you should do that wherever you can afford. But it doesn't mean that you have to give everything that you have to others until. For example, it's not saying that you should not give that you should give your body to others. That's not the case. Until you come to a point where you are able to bear the suffering and do not feel and that you lose something by giving your body, you cannot give your body, and you have to train to be able to give your body to benefit others, so that you do not have any kind of sense of loss. By first of all looking at the body as being as some kind of a vegetable, and then train your body that your mind that you're giving this to others, and then slowly you'll be able to reach a point where you can actually give your body to others. And then there is the fourfold practice of giving, protecting, and purifying, and then increasing or proliferating. So these four have to be practiced by seeing the purpose of what you are doing. So the main thing is to help others, practically help others. You cannot. You may be very genuine and sincere in giving something, but if it doesn't really help the other, you have to see that that it doesn't help others, and therefore, for the time being, not give it if it causes more harm. So having given up this body for the pleasure of all beings, by killing, abusing, and beating it, may they always do as they please. So having dedicated your body for others, even if others abuse you, beat you, and so forth, you should not have this self-grasping or grasping at yourself or the body as being mine and so forth. Verse number 14. And verse number 15. In verse number 15, it says, "Therefore I shall let them do anything to it that does not cause them any harm." The term "that" here could either be referred to the highest enlightenment, omniscience, or to the sentient beings. So you are not going to. What you are saying is, I shall let them do anything that does not cause harm to either your enlightenment, to attaining enlightenment, or to sentient beings. The term in verse number 16, angry here, Kunal Lama Rinpoche has explained that this can be understood in terms of not being happy or so sometimes he points out that some mistakes in the Tibetan translation when he the term faithful here has to be understood in terms of meritorious thoughts. So these kind of prayers, we are on verse number 21, 22. So even in the Christian amongst Christian practitioners like RCC, they have done real practice of this kind of practice. Verse number 20. Number 20. So the most powerful kind of prayer in this chapter are these two verses, verse number 22 and verse number 22. Just like space and the great elements such as earth, may I always support the lives of all the boundless creatures. Mother. So here you gather the courage and determination to dedicate yourself for others, and through this you will be able to accumulate much merit as well as clear away lots of negativities. So whatever you have, you can dedicate them for the benefit of all sentient beings until the end of space. So just as the earth and space and so forth belong to all sentient beings, likewise you can here think about yourself as a possession of all other sentient beings. And until they pass away from pain, may I also be of this source of life for all the realms of the varied beings that reach unto the ends of space.
Starred from previous teachings from His Holiness. That's the important
21. This numbering is different. Because here, I don't know, somewhere there was a short. So that was the prerequisites for that of taking the bodhicitta, such as taking refuge and the 7 limbs. And now comes the actual generation of bodhicitta. Just as the previous Sugatas gave birth to an awakening mind, and just as they successively dwelt in the Bodhisattva practices, likewise for the sake of all that lives do I give birth to the awakening mind, and likewise shall I too successively follow the practices. And so these 2 verses are said to be used for the that of generation of or taking the conventional and ultimate bodhicitta, the aspiring and venturing bodhicittas together. So if you can take that of the aspiring bodhicitta, generate aspiring bodhicitta by using verse number 23 and the first 2 lines of verse number 24. And the next 2 lines in the verse number 24 as taking the bodhisattva vows, or venturing, generating the venturing bodhicitta. So taking the bodhicitta, that of the aspiring bodhicitta through some ritual, and also taking bodhisattva vows can be done through rituals that are given in the asangas, bodhisattva bhumi, or other sutras such as Jambet Sutra, Sutra of the playful sport of Manjushri. And then in according to the tantric text also there are verses or passages for taking bodhisattva vows. And in certain tantric texts, like the Vairocana Abhisambodhi, you can take bodhisattva vows by first giving your body as in service to others. Verse number 25. In order to further increase it from now on, those with discernment who have licitly seized and awakened mind in this way should highly praise it in the following manner. So one who's really confident that that one can actually become an omniscient one, you will have full of enthusiasm and will be full of courage to venture towards that. Today my life has borne fruit, verse number 26. Having well obtained this human existence, I have been born in the family of Buddha and now am one of Buddha's children. So first of all, you have to know what is bodhicitta through study and listening to teachings, and then develop an understanding and conviction through reflection, and then apply the teachings in your meditation so that you have some degree of experience, and then finally you will have the uncontrived bodhicitta within yourself, and when that becomes quite firm and stable and you feel that you can take the bodhisattva vows, then you take bodhisattva vows. So those who have the bodhisattva, bodhicitta within themselves, and have also taken the generated the aspiring bodhicitta through ritual and made pledge to keep it and so forth, as well as feel that they are able to keep the bodhisattva vows and taken they can actually take bodhisattva vows. But for us who are not bodhisattvas yet, there are in Bodhisattva Bhumi, a Sangha has this formula where it says the disciples are asked, "Are you a bodhisattva? And do you aspire to have bodhicitta?" Verse number 27, thus whatever actions I do from now on must be in accord with the family. Never shall I disgrace or pollute this noble and unsullied race. So in India, the tradition, the custom is that the children follow the trade of the fathers. So in the same manner it is mentioned here, whatever actions I do from now on must be in accord with the family. So we who have this courage or the determination to do whatever need be for the benefit of other sentient beings, without having any kind of selfish motive, you become really noble. So here, being able to do away with or give up selfish attitude is the highest form of nobility. And then, in order to feel delight in your heart, the next verse, just as verse number 28, just like a blind man discovering a jewel in a heap of rubbish, likewise by some coincidence an awakening mind has been born within me. So mainly in the Sanskrit tradition, in general, of course, bodhicitta, but particularly in the Bodhisattvayana or Mahayana, the Sanskrit tradition, this term awakening mind, to bodhicitta, which is to say that one actually disregards one's own happiness, but dedicated for the well-being of others and cherish others, hold them dear. So it is something that that should give us delight, that we have the opportunity to even hear the word or the name awakening mind or bodhicitta, and so you should have the sense of wonder that you have such an opportunity to cultivate this kind of altruistic mind. So here also you are pledging that you will lead all sentient beings to the ultimate state of enlightenment, of Buddhahood. It is the supreme ambrosia. Therefore, this bodhicitta is the ambrosia, supreme ambrosia that overcomes the sovereignty of death. So bodhicitta will give you courage to, and so you have self-confidence. Therefore, this gives you great light, confidence. Believe in yourself to be able to do something great. So if you help others, the person becomes closer to you, whereas if you harm somebody, then that person becomes more distant from you. And therefore, selfish attitude keeps you distant from others. The more distant you are from others, you are more suspicious with each other. And then there is fear, suspicion, and fear, and then distrust, and then there is all kinds of disturbances. If you are close, if you have close feeling with somebody, then you have friendship, and there's no sense of competition with them, and no, you will not feel higher than them or better than the other person, and so forth. And you will not also covet their possession, as well as not have a sense of harming them. So lots of virtues ensue from this. So you will have trust, and then there is friendship. If you have if you cherish others, if you love and have warm-heartedness towards others, then you will have friendship. Whereas if you don't have that, then if you're selfish, you'll have no friends. So with this warm hearts, you'll have physical health. It is the inexhaustible treasure that eliminates all the poverty in the world. Verse number 29. Last two lines. So even in this life, you'll have lots of friends if you have good hearts. So you will have lots of favorable conditions. It is the supreme medicine that quells the world's disease. So the happier you are, the elements in your body will be in balance, and you will be able to have immunity towards sicknesses, as well as the sickness that you have will be cured quickly. It is the tree that shelters all beings, wandering and tired on the path of conditioned existence. Who are those beings who are in this conditioned existence, who have wandered in this endless cycle of existence since time beginningless? Towards such beings, you have this sense of concern for their well-being, solely for their well-being, and you will be able to have a sense of looking at them as your own, as if a mother, like a mother's love towards her only child. So although this body that we have is a contaminated one, which has come from contaminated karma and delusions, but in mind you will have, if you have the warm heart, the bodhicitta, and that understanding of selflessness, then you will have mentally, you will have some kind of experience or of relief. So therefore it is the shelter that, it is a tree that shelters all beings. So with the verse number 31, His Holiness is relating it to the 4 ways of gathering disciples. It is a universal bridge that leads to the freedom from unhappy states of mind, birth. So it will help to undermine the strength of negative thoughts and emotions. So by in terms of the different antidotes to our negativities, there are those which for the time being undermines them, and then there are those which totally overcome them, as well as certain antidotes or which for the time being makes you distant from the afflictive thoughts and emotions. And there's a 4th one, which is Holiness says he doesn't remember. So understanding of selflessness is the antidote which actually uproots or overcomes the delusions. So you should have unbiased mind in order to see the reality. If you are biased, you cannot be objective, so to say in English. If you are biased, then you cannot be objective. And you cannot see the reality objectively. The part of the brain which can produce intelligence will be overshadowed if you are overcome with anger or attachment and so forth. So in order for our intelligence to be effective, you have to have a realistic approach, unbiased attitude, state of mind. And for that, you should not have... if you have less self-centered attitude, then it can help to see the reality better, because and if you are more concerned with others' well-being, that will help in that as well. So to see the reality objectively, you have to be unbiased, and therefore the peaceful mind is necessary, without any fear or anxiety. So unbiased state of mind can be achieved if you are calm, your mind is calm. So all the good things in our life come mostly from that of altruistic attitude, whereas all kinds of misfortunes that happen to us are due to our self-cherishing attitude, and therefore we can see the benefit and the disadvantage of these two clearly. And Buddha himself has dedicated himself for the well-being of all sentient beings, and then therefore his teaching is given for that reason. It is this for this bodhicitta is said to be the quintessential butter from the churning of the milk of Dharma. Verse number 33 and 34. Even if people were to go and perform some prayers and pujas for others, of course, if you recite the mantras and utter the home, home, pet, pet, and so forth, complemented by that of the sense of bodhicitta, it will be really helpful. You can meditate or think, reflect on bodhicitta, and when you think about the harmful beings, you can think in terms, look at them or think about them with bodhicitta. And therefore it says, may gods, demigods, and all be joyful. And so there's a story that one Lama was invited to subdue some evil being who was possessing others. And when the Lama went there, when the evil spirit went to harm the Lama, it wasn't able to harm Lama because the ghost was able to see that this Lama was actually considering or regarding him to be more dearer than the Lama himself. And so it seems that ghost was quite an intelligent one. So this completes the third chapter of the Bodhisattva Charyavatara. May this the bodhicitta. So with this we have covered the meaning of the first two lines of this prayer, which says, may the precious bodhicitta grow where it is not yet arisen. And then next two chapters show the practice of morality, with the practice of conscientiousness, and then that of introspection. Shows this text shows the practice of morality. So we begin with the first conscientiousness, chapter 4, verse number 2, verse number 3. Having generated bodhicitta within yourself, you should engage in the practices of bodhisattvas, the precepts. So why you need to do so is you will also be able to see the benefit or the merit of bodhicitta, and then there will be inspiration to take the bodhisattva vows. So you do voluntarily take the bodhisattva vows, feeling inspired to do so. As it was said before, that the Buddhas have thought for eons and eons what is most beneficial, and saw that this only this altruistic attitude of bodhicitta is the one thing that is beneficial. And then not only that, you also through investigation and examination, and then thinking about the benefit of bodhicitta and so forth, have found that it is the sole factor for bringing benefit to others and oneself. Verse number 4, if having made such a promise I do not put it into action, then by deceiving every living being, what kind of rebirth shall I take? So having made prayers or promises like, I will liberate others who are not liberated, I will release them, those who are not released, and I will lead them to the complete enlightenment, those who are not there yet. So if you do not put that into action, then by deceiving every living being, what kind of rebirth shall I take? It says. If it has been taught by the Buddha that those who do not give away with the smallest thing which they once intended to give will take rebirth as hungry ghosts, even if a small, it may be a small thing, a trivial thing that you may have thought to give others, but you don't give. If that kind of thing attitude leads you to hungry ghost, then if I should deceive all beings after having sincerely invited them to the unsurpassable bliss, shall I take a happy rebirth? Only the omniscient can discern the manner of the action of those who give up the awakening mind but are freed. It is beyond the scope of ordinary thought. So this one relates a story about Shariputra in the past having given up bodhicitta, but still having, in the end he became an arahant. So so Bodhisattva are the precepts or the vows that you keep in regard to Bodhisattva vows are like not praising oneself and not despising others. And so forth, and others are, you may lose the these Bodhisattva vows if you are overcome with wrong view. The four binding factors, four thoroughly binding factors, if you are overcome with these four binding factors, then you lose them. Whereas with regard to wrong view and once you develop wrong view, you lose bodhisattva vows. So even if you have taken the bodhisattva vow and then lost it, and then again you take bodhisattva vows again, and again cause to decline and so forth, it will take long time to attain the final goal. Those of the higher bodhisattva grounds and so forth will take longer time to attain. Of course, you may be able to take bodhisattva vows again and again, but so it's better to keep the bodhisattvas without causing any decline to them, rather than having to take it over and over again after losing them. Tsongkhapa has said that it is better to protect one's leg before it's injured to such a point that you may have to, in the end, cut your leg. So having found this human life at this time, we should not waste it even for a day. So since there is no beginning to the samsara, which has to be understood on the basis of the mind having no beginning, so we are, of course, since time beginningless, we are under the power of our delusions and the karma. So if you ask the question, why is it that right from the beginning of our life, when we have this clear and knowing nature of the mind, that we are also deluded? We could say that's perhaps nature. So the fact that the mind has this nature of luminosity and awareness is its nature. And the fact that there is happiness and suffering is also nature. And therefore we have a wish for happiness and avoid suffering. So even during the time of the Buddha himself, even an insect, an ant who may have been nearby, close to the Buddha, would have gained certain potency within themselves to become enlightened. And then later on we had the masters like Nagarjuna and Sangha and so forth in India as well as in Tibet. There have been so many masters as well as in China and Burma and Thailand. I mean, even today there are cases where people are said to be arhats. So they may have overcome the very obvious form of desire realm, the delusion states of mind in the desire realm, and so it may be a case that these arhats could be arhats according to the Abhidharma tradition, and perhaps there are those. There may be also those who have realized the true, the ultimate nature of emptiness, of the selflessness of phenomena, and become arhats. And in Tibet, there have been so many masters who have become enlightened in the Nyingma tradition as well as the old Kadamba tradition. And in the Kagyu, similarly, as well as Sakya and Gyaluk traditions. So there have been so many marvelous masters who have become enlightened. So if we had the opportunity to seek their guidance, we may not be in this state today. As Lama Chöpa says that although countless numbers of Buddhas have arrived, but I'm left in this degenerated age. So even today, there are people who have visions of the Buddhas. For example, in Thailand, there was a great practitioner who had a vision of the Buddha, Shakyamuni. So we are rather left helpless. And if verse number 14, and if I continue to act like this again and again, shall I undergo suffering and unhappy rants, sickness, bondage, laceration, and the shedding of blood. Verse number 15. So when the Buddhas appear in the world, that time is called the age of light. And when the Buddhas don't appear anymore in the world, the time is known as the age of darkness. So of course there are certain things which have to be demonstrated through the scriptural authority, but even in that case you have to first of all know that the scripture itself doesn't have any contradiction within it in terms of what it shows, in terms of what can be obvious, is true, and then what the scripture shows also, you find that the scripture itself is not full of contradictions. And that we are able to prove things and infer them through what is known as evidence-based logic. And then once you become convinced about that, then you can take the scripture to be authentic and unmistaken about the very subtle, obscure phenomena that are not perceptible to us as well. So it is said that there are going to be 1,000 Buddhas in this fortunate eon. So it seems that the comparing between the time when each Buddha's teachings live in the world and the time when their teachings are no more there, it seems the time where there's no teaching of the Buddha is longer. So even if the teaching of the Buddha may be in the world, amongst the nearly 7 billion humans on this earth, there may be 3 billion Buddhists on this planet. Those who claim to be Buddhists, so to say. In China proper, it is said that the population of Buddhists is 300 million. So perhaps we have 500 million. In all, on this earth, the Buddhism is still alive. It is said that the teaching of the Buddha Shakyamuni will live for 5,000 years. There are different regarding the longevity of the teaching of the Buddha. There are different explanations in different texts, although. So far 2,000 or nearly 2,600 years have passed. Recently, somewhere in Afghanistan, some archaeologists have found an image of Aryatara. I saw a picture of that, and when they checked through carbon dating, the statue is said to have to be 2,600 years, more than 2,600 years. So it seems it is older than the time after the Buddha, which is according to Theravada, it's say 2,500 years. So even within the Tibetan tradition, there are different ways of interpreting different sayings about the time since the death of the Buddha. Some say that it's been 2,000 to 3,000 or more, and according to Sajja Pandita, it's 2,000 something. So even if the teaching of the Buddha may be alive, but you may be born in a place where there is no teaching, or in a place where there are people who do not have any, who have disbelief in religion. Even amongst Tibetans these days, there are people who are saying that Buddhism is deceiving us. So there are people who are atheists. So although the teaching of the Buddha may be there in a place, but then there may be people who, even in that land, who are not so happy with the teaching, who do not have any belief. (16) Although today I am healthy, well-nourished and unreflected, life is momentary and deceptive. So you have come from Singapore and other places saying that you are going to this teaching. And then we have started the teaching yesterday. One day has gone, and so today is the second day. It's also so today the second day is finishing, the second day of the teaching. So time is always flowing. It doesn't stop. If time stops, if we can stop it, of course we cannot do that. There's a story about Drupchen Virupa or Virvapa having stopped the movement of the sun. But time cannot be stopped by anybody. So it goes on, continues. but to make it meaningful so that it's not wasted and make it purposeful. The time always flows and each second goes by. If you can make each second, each moment, each minute, and each day, each week and month and years to be meaningful, then it's going to be, you'll be living a very meaningful life. So nobody can stop time. So what you need to do is to make it meaningful. Life is momentary and deceptive. Verse number 16. So we have this notion that this day, today, this morning, such and such thing happened, and this evening, such and such thing happened, and so forth. When you think about it like that, you have a notion that the day just remains without changing. But that's not the case. Life is momentary and deceptive. The body is like an object on loan for but a minute. So this body is like something that you have borrowed from others. You do not own it. But if you are not careful, verse number 17 says, with behavior such as this, the three doors of body, speech and mind with which we create all kinds of negative actions, I shall not win a human body again, and if this human form is not attained, there will be solely wrongdoing and no virtue. So, having found this human body where you have the opportunity to cultivate the warm heart and understanding of Hampton and so forth, there will be solely wrongdoing and no virtue. Verse number 18. So this shows the rarity or difficulty of finding the human life. If you're overpowered by anger or hatred, you cause great negative action, and which will cause you suffering for a long time. So it's quite sure that we have lots of negative actions that we have created before, which we have not confessed. Then so you may ask that even if one has not purified negative action that we have created, but we may be born into lower realms of existence, and by that these negative actions will not be purified. Of course not, because even when you are born into the lower realms of existence, for example, as an animal, we can see how much negative actions they still create by taking others' life and so forth. And there is no moment for them to think of virtue. And even in the case of hungry ghosts, the hungry ghosts could harm each other, and they could also perhaps harm other sentient beings. And then the same things happen in the hell realm. Verse number 28. So verse number 28 shows how the delusions, afflicted thoughts and emotions actually harm us. Arrogance, jealousy, attachment, and so forth. With regard to competitive thought and attitude, there may be something which is negative, but there can be also a positive aspect of it. So sometimes it can happen that when you think about the high states of Bodhisattvas, they may seem to be very high, too high for us. But then if you can think about the Sangha, and then before becoming a Sangha, someone who is on the path, like part of preparation and part of accumulation, and then those beings having generated bodhicitta and so forth, it becomes perhaps closer to you. So, of course, we can reflect on that of shamatha, which has to be attained by overcoming mental excitement and laxity. And if you can feel close to the cultivation of shamatha and vipassana, and then you can also think about think closer and feel closer to attaining those of the part of accumulation, part of preparation. So of course I'm not here saying that I have attained realized emptiness or anything like that, but if I have the time to practice meditation, then I feel that I could actually have some experience. So of course I do not have the time, I have an excuse, but others should try their best to cultivate and shamatha, the calm abiding meditation within themselves. So if something feels closer to you, then you may be able to feel inspired to attain, to reach that kind of attainment that others have. So you are using those who are higher than you as examples to you to proceed yourself further. So that kind of attitude is not the bad kind of competitive feeling. So otherwise, the negative aspect of competitive feeling is like you want to be the winner and you want the others to be the losers. So that's not something we want. But here we can have competitive feeling without trying to undermine others and not looking down upon others and trying to overcome them, such. So even hatred, which is motivated by compassion, has an aspect of wrath, but then it's not the same as the hatred that we have, which solely wants to overcome the other, to harm the other. So when you say that I'm going to do things which bring well-being and benefit to others until the end of space, there is this kind of pride or confidence within yourself. So in this same text, it talks about this kind of pride as well. But when this is not a pride which disregards others' well-being at all. But in order to overcome your negative thoughts and emotions, you feel that you can actually do that. Verse number 28. Although enemies such as hatred and craving have neither any arms nor legs, and are neither courageous nor wise, so in this verse it says such as or etc., which would include such states of mind as jealousy and pride or arrogance and so forth. So these negative thoughts, emotions, have neither any legs nor arms nor legs. So they do not have any weapons and are neither courageous nor wise. So they're not heroes holding weapons of destruction, but how have I, like a slave, been used by them? Until you hear that destructive emotions are something bad, you are not aware of this fact. In the Hindu tradition also, they talk about the certain states of mind, like the desire in the desire realm to be negative, when they try to develop concentration, which leads to the concentration realm and so forth. But for us, normally what happens is we take anger and hatred to be like a friend who's kind of protect us. A person may be very humble usually, but when he becomes angry, they become so overwhelmed by it and nobody can stop. So I usually make this joke with Korean monks that regarding in relation to their monks' robes, I say them that they could, when they become angry, they could fold up the sleeves and then flex their muscles. So on the surface level, we might find that anger actually helps us more courage.
That energy actually blind energy. 저자가 지단도 스텝이나 뉴
So anger seems to help us, or attachment also seems to be kind to us. So when you're angry, we tend to be under the power of anger in such a way that it advises us not to be weak and discouraged. So if we have someone who is very short-tempered and angry, people sometimes praise such a person. Oh, this person is really someone who is able to do something. And so in this way we can become slaves of attachment and anger. But if we hear that, if we hear about the disadvantage of attachment and anger, and that there is a possibility to attain nirvana by overcoming it.
Sometimes people get the impression these are signs of weakness. Actually not.
Actually signs of strength. 자, 들이 인도산에 왜나 서로 공스러운.
So of course, when we talk about showing tolerance or patience, if you are not able to overcome the other party, then of course you have to stand still. But the main thing is not to have anger or hatred towards those who harm you. So of course, if those who harm you are unjustly doing that, you have to feel compassionate towards the person, but their action, while having compassion, love towards them, you have to object to their actions which are negative. But you should not lose your compassion towards them. In Christianity and Islam, they say that sin is not forgiven by God.
Never forgiveness about sin. But to sinner, he always give forgiveness. He always love, compassion, not sin. So we can make distinction. Sinner, sin. Sin as an action. Sinner as the actor. So we can make distinction. So forgiveness means to the sinner, not the sin. So similarly, someone really sort of carrying some, injustice of actions, or take advantage on you. On that circumstances, you have to take countermeasure, oppose their action. But that does not mean you develop anger to the actor. Still keep compassion, love, and that brings forgiveness. But as far as their wrongdoing is concerned, we have to oppose. Clear? That sort of action to oppose their sort of injustice action is actually out of sense of concern of their well-being. Clear? So once we know some quite detail about the system or the system or the certain kind of I don't know. So to interrelated these different emotions, we can make distinction like that. So really it is
Therefore, God doesn't allow sin, but He forgives the sinner. So we have to make distinction between the sinner and the sin. So when you do confession, you also make distinction between yourself and the negative action that you have done. You say, I have done something wrong. That action that I've done is wrong, but you yourself, you distinguish yourself from the negative action. Therefore, you acknowledge the mistake to be mistake, and then try to regret it and confess it, as well as think of not repeating it again. And therefore, there's no need for anger. If you try to confront the sinner with anger, it's not sure. You cannot be sure whether you'll be able to hit the target or not. But with a calm mind, if you confront the wrongdoer, then you'll be able to do it more effectively. You'll be able to hit the target. So with a sense of concern for the well-being of the other, if you try to confront their wrongdoing, it will be more effective. With anger, your intelligence is overshadowed, and you will the intelligence to make distinction between what is right and wrong is rather blinded. Verse number 29. So you are allowing all these negative thoughts and emotions to do whatever they like to you. So that's why it says, for a while they dwell within my mind, at their pleasure they cause me harm. Yet I patiently endure them without any anger. But this is an inappropriate and shameful time for patience. Verse number 31, 32. As I said earlier, since time beginningless, our negative thoughts and emotions have always been with us. The seed has been always there, and no sooner as some conditions meet, we burst out with anger and so forth. So even if someone may be your enemy, it's only for one life. So of course, a person cannot be your enemy through the whole of his or her life. The person may not have been your enemy when he or she was young. Yet the mighty foe, these disturbing conceptions, in a moment can cause me amidst those flames, which, when met, will cause not even the ashes of the king of mountains to remain. So even with these ordinary enemy, we can have a dialogue with them and then resolve our issues through mutual understanding. And then the enemies can become your friends in the end. All other enemies are incapable of remaining for such a length of time, it says, as can my disturbing conceptions. So So you have to show apply the antidotes to these negative emotions, the disturbing emotions or conceptions. So the inner enemy, which are those of the disturbing conceptions, are the main enemies. Verse number 36. So for the time being, you apply certain antidote which weakens the negative thoughts or emotions. So for example, in the case of anger, you meditate on or cultivate the compassion or loving kindness towards the enemy and undermine this anger. And the enemy appears to be independently existing, as if there is some solid enemy out there. And because of this perception, we become angry. But one scientist, he was not a Buddhist nor a religious person, but from his experience through his experiment, he said that he has found that when we are angry at somebody, we see the person totally negative. But that negativeness, 90% or more of that negativeness is our own mental projection. This is exactly what Buddhism also, Buddhist texts also say. Nagarjuna says that liberation is attained by overcoming our karma and delusions. But karma and delusions come from our misconceptions. So in Buddhist psychology, what is said in Buddhist psychology is exactly the same as what the scientist also explained. So by understanding this, that you should weaken the strength of anger and then apply the antidotes to overcome it completely. So you have to put effort in overcoming anger. So when we are unable to overcome our enemies, the ordinary enemies, we become sleepless. So when we are not able to overcome the enemy that is within us, how can we stay complacent? So, in order to overcome the inner enemy, it cannot happen only through prayers. For even if you may pray for days, weeks, or months, and years, it will not go away. But we have to apply the right kind of antidotes for eons and eons. Verse number 40. So in the case of very ordinary things like farmers toiling their fields and so forth, we put so much effort, and so how it says they endure the suffering of heat and cold. Why am I not patient for the sake of world's joy? So to overcome the suffering of others, why am I not being patient? So you're saying here that you are going to bring all sentient beings to the state of enlightenment. When I promised to liberate all beings who dwell in the 10 directions as far as the ends of space, from this disturbing conception I myself was not yet freed from mine. So you have to see the disturbing conceptions or emotions to be enemies, and then become angry at them and try to overcome them. So you are making a very firm, strong promise or pledge here. Verse number 45. Says, common enemies, ordinary enemies may be vanquished one time, but they will, once they are in some other place, they will try to prepare for the next battle and so come back. But this inner enemy is not like that. Once it's overcome, it will not be able to come back. So how do we actually, what are the means of overcoming the delusions? So verse number 46. In Tibetan, the terms are nyomong and nyomong for deluded. It's translated here as deluded and disturbing conceptions. But regarding the Kunlun Lama Rinpoche, in the Sanskrit version, there are two words, Bhagara and Kalesh. So there are two different words in Sanskrit. The other one is Bhagara, which is to say very feeble. The second one is disturbing conception. So the word is translated here as deluded has to be this feeble, disturbing conception. When so when I was listening to the teaching from Kunlun Lama Rinpoche, at this point I said, oh, these disturbing conceptions are very powerful, and he's very well answered, but they don't have any nuclear weapons. So the disturbing conceptions arise in us because of our lack of understanding of the true nature of things, the reality. And once you understand the reality as it is, then you can overcome this. when forsaken by the eye of wisdom and dispelled from my mind, where will it go? These delusions, where will it dwell in order to be able to injure me again? Weak-minded, I have been reduced to making no effort. So the reality of things is always there. It's a matter of whether we think about it or not. Therefore, saying weak-minded, you call yourself weak-minded, I have been reduced to this making no effort. And these delusions are neither within the objects, the senses, sense organs, between the two, nor elsewhere. So these disturbing conceptions which suffer, through which we and others suffer, and by which we can even destroy the whole world and so forth. So you have the objects in relation to whom you become attached or angered. And then because of these, the state of mind which arises through these kind of interaction between objects and your mind and so forth, they arise. But apart from that, there is no enemy or object of attachment independently existing, nor the anger and attachment do independently exist, apart from and without relation to these other factors. So because they are distorted, totally distorted, therefore, if you look at these with the eye of wisdom, then you will be able to pacify these disturbing conceptions. So if you put effort and persevere in overcoming them, you'll be able to overcome the delusions. 48. So with this, the fourth chapter is completed. So His Holiness is saying that he may not be able to finish this fifth chapter. 4 chapters have been covered.
I will try the next chapter.
Chapter 5.
I hope you're not boring.
We'll try another chapter.
Verse number 1. So in order to, you have to use wisdom to combat with those disturbing emotions. And therefore you have to, on the one hand, understand the emptiness and make it effective to overcome the disturbing conceptions. For that you have to free the wisdom from those of distraction. For that you have to develop the calm abiding, the single-pointed concentration. And in order to develop this, in order to cultivate this, you have to show mindfulness and that of introspection. So the main factor for the single-pointed concentration is mindfulness. You have to develop mindfulness, and For that, you should practice conscientiousness, that you should not indulge in the negative thoughts and emotions. And if you find that you are actually tending towards those negative actions, negative thoughts and emotions, you should immediately turn back from that, and with mindfulness. And therefore, in order to have single-pointed concentration, you should have that of morality. Verse number 2. So to control the mind, so that it does not become like the unsubdued and crazed with elephant. Verse number 4. Verse number 5. Verse number 6. So all kinds of harms that we receive from either beings with bodies or spirits is because of our undisciplined, uncontrolled mind. The war and famine that happen in the world also ensue from our undisciplined mind. Then there are these natural disasters. Of course, in the external world, there are the 5 elements, and then within ourselves, there are the 5 elements. So they are connected. So when we talk about karma and delusions, of course, we have to explain it on the basis of the mind. So that's part of consciousness. So there you have to link the consciousness with the inanimate things. How do we make that link? If you don't think carefully, then it's quite intriguing. So these external objects are what are known as the world of container. Of course, this thing in front of me have some relation to my karma. Of course, it comes later that when you have a piece of wood, where does it come from? Of course, it comes from its own source. And when you ask where that source has come from, it is said that the source itself has come from its own former source. And in this way, you can trace back to sources that have existed earlier. And similarly, the mind has existed and its continuity in previous times. So when we say that we should be able to, we can explain that things are because of our karma by taking a recourse to certain other factors. But if you look precisely at how things happen, then we can talk about the principle of nature working here. That things come about by nature. So through the origin or the source of suffering, which are those of the karma and delusions, the external world and internal world also appear. The matters that are made up, that make up the external world and the internal world of our bodies, there are those of the gross and subtle elements. So when we talk about the elements and then the constituent factors, the fire and so forth, the element here refers to the very subtle source of the fire and so forth. So when you go back to the very fine sources of these elements, fire and so forth, they cannot be distinguished easily at a very subtle atomic or subtle level. It's mentioned in Ratnavali by Nagarjuna. And then in Tantra, in the highest Yoga Tantra, there's mention of the life-bearing wind energy. So I think maybe there is some connection here with this, because the wind energy there is something which is physical. So here I'm deviating a little bit. So this is. So ultimately, it is saying that all the external world and the internal world of sentient beings are come from the mind. So indirectly, they have some connection there. And then we have the external world, which is called the possession of the beings. Verse number 6. Verse number 7. Verse number 8, line 4, there is nothing to fear other than mind. So this shows the source or the cause of suffering. And then next, verse number 9. Verse number 11. Verse number 13. Verse number 14. 15. 16. So this seems to be teaching the training of wisdom. So all the practices of generosity, morality, down to wisdom are related to the mind, these shows. So the goodness and the bad things that happen in the world are happen because of our mind being undisciplined or disciplined. verse number 19, up to there, what is shown is that you have to show mindfulness all the time. And verse number 20 and 21. So verse number 22 says, or even in the midst of women, the steady effort to control myself will not decline. So this is in relation to, this is said because he was giving this teaching to the monks in the monastery. So we can extend the same logic to, the other way around. So for women, when you read this verse, you can think about the, you can say, if even in the midst of men, the steady effort of control myself, to control myself will not decline, should be understood. So otherwise, some friends of mine, women friends of mine, have said that Shantideva is really critical about women. That's not the case. So for a man, a practitioner, he has to think about the faults of the body of a woman, whereas for a women practitioner, she has to think about the faults of the body of the men. Verse number 22. Verse number 23. So Shantideva is really urging us to this. Verse number 24. 25. So you have to be mindful and not to forget the things. Verse number 26. There is a story here. A monk came from a very far away from place to Lhasa in central Tibet, and he took a monk's vows. And afterwards, he studied Vinaya, which teaches about the monk's vows. So by that time, he found out that he had actually gone against all the vows and lost his vows. So he said, when I was a monk, I had no knowledge of Vinaya. When I now understand Vinaya, I have no vows. So in the meantime, he had met with some unfortunate circumstances and lost his vows. So you have to know the vows that you have to keep, and then also show respect to the Dharma and so forth, in order that you may not be overcome by delusions, and then show heed the advice of keeping the vows as well. "29. Therefore I shall never let mindfulness depart." So first know what you have to practice and what you need to adopt and what you need to discard or overcome. And then with mindfulness you should check whether you are actually going against your precepts, which are to be practiced, and then also committing those wrongdoings or not. So first you have to have conscientiousness or heedfulness, and on the basis of that then you will have mindfulness. So the causes and conditions for mindfulness are qualified spiritual masters, in the verse number 30. and abbots or precept masters, so who gave you the vows and instructions about the precepts, and also fear of samsara, and the falling into extreme of peace, of liberation. So mindfulness will easily be generated in fortunate people who practice with respect. Verse number 31. I am ever dwelling in the presence of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who are always endowed with unobstructed vision. So when you understand that there are Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who are able to see whatever you do at any time, anywhere, then you should be able to be heedful about the virtuous practices. Of course, you may say that there are nobody around me and nobody can see me, but the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas always see what you do. So when you travel to places, the monks are advised not to look here and there, but unless there is some reason to check whether there are some dangers on the way or not. Verse number 40. Verse number 41 to 42. If there is some danger, so if you engage in some kind of amusement which is related to the Dharma, to relax, it shows that. The 42, I'm sorry. So you have to take the main purpose of what you have to do first, give them priority. 43. (45), 46, 47, 48. So this shows how to cultivate our mindfulness and introspection. 49. (50), 51, 52,
人性的呢，太来说，
Verse number 60. Holding this body as mine, why mind? You guard it so. Since you and it are separate, what use can it be to you? So, verse number 61 shows that of meditation on the filthiness of this body to overcome our attachment to verse number 68. So you should not let yourself be driven by attachment to the body. Seventy-five and 76. So 75 says you have to praise others, but if there is danger that your praise might cause someone to become arrogant, then you should not do so in front of him, but may do so discreetly in front of others. So, whereas if you praise somebody and the person does not become arrogant, then you should do so. $79. 80. $81. So always being motivated by great aspiration or being motivated by the remedial forces. If I work in the fields of excellence, benefit and misery, great virtues will come. 82. Verse number 83 says, but for a little morality I should not forsake a great gift. Principally, I should consider what will be of most benefit for others. So here John is saying that the analysis is very precise and detailed. So whereas the Pratimoksha vows, which are kept in connection with that of the thought of renunciation, there are certain vows which, when one is doing something action for the benefit of others, they are certain. They are allowed sometimes. Verse number 87. So until your compassion and wisdom are really pure, then you should not give your body. It says, should not give your body away. 88. 89 says, no to women are unaccompanied by a woman. So for a nun, it's the other way around. Verse number 19 says, in the fourth line, nor mislead others by means of sutras or mantras. So I wonder if in Tibet, where people only performed rituals without really understanding the dharma, this could be applied to them, not. And in China, of course, there's a tradition of only reading the sutras and not really studying them much. Verse number 91. As it is said in the Pratimoksha Sutra, when eating, I should not fill my mouth and so forth. Refers to that. '95. 96 shows how to sleep. '98. 99. 100. 101. 102. So with regard to the qualifications of a guru, it shows a guru, it should be a spiritual master who is wise in the meaning of the great vehicle, Mahayana scriptures, and who is a great Bodhisattva practitioner. Not somebody not only learned in words, but also who is practical. Verse number 103. 104. So it says I should read the sutras and as well as the shastras, the commentary texts. The compendium of all practices is the other text which Shantideva wrote. The unique way of cultivating introspection is shown by this 107.
So, now tomorrow, the Abhisheka
of Avalokiteshvara. So tomorrow, 9. We will start at 9 o'clock. I will come here, 8 o'clock. Some preparation, like that. So, good night. Good sleep. A good rest.